At some point in 2020, I made the decision to start listening to as much new music as possible and to document it along the way by recording my overall thoughts and feelings after listening to each album. Obviously, this concept is nothing revolutionary, but what you fail to consider is, I don't care. I'm doing it anyway. I spent hours and hours listening to albums from Grammy winners, Billboard chart toppers, masters of TikTok algorithm manipulation, and artists who are just not very good. Nevertheless, I came out on top and am now able to share my experience with you. So here it is, every 2020 album I could possibly listen to, ranked. First, I just want to admit that I didn't manage to get to everything I had on my radar. I did most of it, and even listened to a lot of the stuff that you see here, I just didn't feel like I had listened to it enough to really give it a fair score. So yeah, if it's on this list, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but it did slip by me. Also, really quick, here are the EPs that I got to. There aren't many, so I'll make this quick. The Calvin Harris thing barely counts because there were like 4 songs and 2 of them were remixes of the other 2. It was really weird, but it was loud and clubby. It was like acid EDM and I didn't like it. As for the Pluko, Walkabout, and Wallow's EPs, I really enjoyed them all. They were fun projects with a couple standouts like Only Smoke Cigs on the Weekend and Talk Like That, and yeah. Okay, now to finally begin the list, on each side you will see one album with a little blurb that I wrote after my first 1 or 2 listens through each album, along with the name, artist, and score I gave it based off of my feelings towards it. The list is ordered worst to best, and with that, let's get into it. Starting off with my least favorite album of the year is Southside by Sam Hunt. Now, I'm by no means a country fan, and I would never have listened to this normally, but I heard it was bad, and curiosity got the better of me. And yeah, it is terrible. So next is My Turn by Lil Baby. I had this on my list for a while just because it was popular, and eventually I decided to listen to it during a bus ride when I had literally nothing else to do. That bus ride will forever be etched in my memory as the longest bus ride I've ever taken because the hour I spent listening to this album felt like 10. It is a miracle that I actually made it through the whole thing. It was so boring and repetitive, and I get that a lot of people like this album, but I don't get why. Wanna by Gunna featuring hit song Wanna is literally just one drawn out song that sounds like nothing and is barely enjoyable in any capacity. I felt comatose while listening to this and I was on a run at the time, and yeah, it's a 1 out of 10. High Off Life by Future was one of those albums I put off listening to for a while because I wasn't excited for it at all. And then I finally listened to it and I proved myself right. Trap music needs help. It wasn't good until it wasn't by Kalani. This is maybe the most unfair rating on here since I only got to Water, which is like the 5th song in, before I dropped it, and I can put up with a lot of stuff, but horny astrology music is not on that list. The Justin Bieber album was straight up dull. When it came out, I heard that the song featuring Lil Dicky was originally featuring Ski Mask, and trust me, if the Ski Mask verse that I heard had been left on this album, then it would have been a 6 out of 10 at least, just due to that. Also, please delete Yummy, just in general. It doesn't need to be in this world. The Grimes album just kind of didn't do it for me. I don't remember much about it besides being just kind of generally uninterested. Besides, like, there were a couple kind of cool instrumentals, but other than that, it wasn't my thing. The Quinn 92 album was very disappointing considering his 2 previous projects were really great. A lot of the lyrics were corny, generic, or God forbid, both. And all in all, this is one of the bigger disappointments of the year. Speaking of disappointments, next on our list we have Eternal Take, which is one of the most anticipated albums since Yandhi. This was widely expected to be one of Uzi's best projects given its anticipated release, but in reality it was a poorly executed trap concept album that wasn't good at being either of those things. The Group Love album, Healer, was unremarkable and only had 1 or 2 interesting tracks in my opinion. The Blueface album was nothing groundbreaking, not that I was expecting it to be, but at the end of the day, no matter how weird and offbeat Blueface is, he's still pretty entertaining to listen to because he's funny, and if you don't believe me, go listen to Carne Asada and Holy Moly. Alright, yeah, this is not going to be a popular opinion at all, but I thought the Mac Miller album was really boring. The songs blended together and they just weren't really interesting. The only 2 songs I kind of liked were Blue World and Good News. Please don't hate me, Mac Miller sheep. Considering the fact that Kygo's first album, Cloud9, was so groundbreaking for its genre and is still one of my favorite albums of all time, this one hurt a lot. The song topics were repetitive and uninspired, and the features were unnecessary, and the songs ranged from mildly catchy to straight up awful. Hyperspace by Beck was something I don't really remember all too well, but I do remember vibing with the harmonica riffs, so yeah, 4 out of 5 just for that. If there's one type of album I usually don't like, it's lovesick singer-songwriter ballads. I just can't vibe with them, and I never have, most likely never will. So yeah, this MX Toon project really just wasn't my type of thing. Bauer has come so far from the Harlem Shake. Like, what an insane 180. But again, this isn't really my type of music. I can still really appreciate the talent behind it though. The Neon Trees album was actually alright. The album opener, Nights, was the major standout, and while the rest of the album was far less interesting, it was still pretty good across the board. Bro, the Scalantis album. I wanted this to be good so badly, but after hearing all 8 of the teaser tracks, let me just say again, all 8 teaser tracks, I kind of lost hope. The duo's first 2 albums were fresh, summery, and fun, but I guess everyone kind of runs out of steam eventually. There were a few decent songs on this, mostly the ones that weren't released early, but oh boy, if you do end up giving this album a listen, skip Faith. It is easily one of the worst songs I have ever heard in my entire life. It is on my list of my least favorite songs of all time. Do not listen to it ever. The audio album was one of those ones I was really hopeful for. In the end, there were a few standouts like TD, Oprah's Bank Account, and somehow Range Rover Sports Truck managed to be fairly entertaining, but there was a lot of filler. If this had been cut down by 5 or 6 or 7 songs, this album could have been one of Yachty's best in a while. Childish Gambino's 3:15:20 was weird. I listened to it a few times, and while there were a couple songs I really liked, like Algorithm and 1238, there were others I just wasn't really a fan of, and so given the positives and negatives, it all balances out to just a big stinky 5. Baby No Money has never had an unlikable song. This man has some of the most consistent delivery I've ever seen. That being said, the beat choices on this project get a bit stale. Also, the outro track is so different from everything else, it was weird. Like, what was that about? The Eminem album was surprisingly tolerable, and I actually enjoyed the first half a lot, and Godzilla is one of his best songs, period. The second half, however, is a different story, and I was not nearly as much of a fan of it. That being said, every song on this project was better than any of the ones on his last 2, so at least there's that. Guppy None. Some head-banging electronic thrasher music for you. Yep. This is gonna be another really unpopular one, but I just couldn't get into After Hours. I listened to it like 3 or 4 times and I just didn't get the appeal. Someone in the comments, please explain why this was as popular as it was. I just can't wrap my head around it. Every time Kyle announces a new project, he says he's taking it back to the Beautiful Loser days, and he never really does. At some point you have to wonder when he's just gonna move on. Anyway, listen to Girls, because that song goes fucking hard. Nothing crazy to say about the Glass Animals album. It was decent across the board, but there was nothing that really stood out in either direction. This album has an interlude called Jungle Pussy Juice, and that should be enough to convince you to listen to it. Also, shout out Shamir for another crazy 180 in the music world. Yeah, I liked the Baby album. Fucking live with it. The Equali album was a roller coaster between really great songs and just kind of generic EDM, vibey, electronic music. Yeah. Lil Uzi Vert vs. The World 2 was Uzi's redemption of 2020. I don't know why he released it as an extended version of Eternal Take, but I'm gonna pretend that he didn't because this album is leagues ahead. Literally everything about this album is better. I'm not even gonna give examples because if you're wondering if there's something better about this album that's better than it was in EA, it is. Just assume it is. Alright, look, I'm always down for a new Young Gravy project, but I'll be the first to admit this one got a little samey over the course of 14 songs and almost 40 minutes of runtime. On this project, Amine abandoned a lot of the more upbeat, punchy beats that I liked on 1.5, but that doesn't mean I didn't enjoy it. In fact, it was quite the opposite, with songs like Pressure in My Palms and Compensating being some of his most enjoyable yet. When I was told Taylor was coming out with a second 2020 album, I was really excited, but I think it was much less interesting across the board, both instrumentally and topically, than Folklore, and by the end of it, I couldn't help feeling like it was just a project of songs that didn't make it onto Folklore, just kind of B-sides. I'm not convinced it isn't to this point. I won't try to act like Willow isn't great and Nobody No Crime isn't a crazy narrative that she absolutely killed, but it really does just come off like B-sides. This album is way better than it should have been. It's almost annoying because I didn't want to like a country album this much, ever, but you know, Diplo did what Diplo does. Just a reminder that I wrote these blurbs at least 7 months ago, and some of them well over a year ago, so I don't really know what I was referring to when I wrote this, so I'm just gonna take my word for it. The lead single of this Dominic Fike album was Chicken Tenders, and after hearing what that was, I expected more songs in that sort of smooth, poppy vein, and even though Chicken Tenders turned out to be an outlier as far as that vibe goes, I still enjoyed this album quite a bit. For those of you who don't know, this Major Lazer album was supposed to be a sister album for Peace is the Mission, an album that came out in 2015 with multiple insanely popular tracks like Lean On and Light It Up. To this day, that album is still among my top 25 of all time, and I was hoping for more of that from Music is the Weapon, which I don't think was too unrealistic, you know, considering they are sister albums and everything. Also, it had been 5 fucking years, and I was hoping for something great. As you can see, Music is the Weapon was by no means what I expected, and although there were some solid tracks, it really just wasn't the same. This Kid Cudi project was another one of those ones that went from fucking bangers like Boyd and Tequila Shots into absolute slogs like fucking Elsie's Baby Boy. I can't stand that song. In general though, it was pretty good, but I feel like it was one of those albums that literally everyone listened to last year, so you probably already know this. This Carly Rae Jepsen album had so many hits that if I was rating it today, it would be much higher. Fake Mona Lisa, Solo, This Is What They Say, This Love Isn't Crazy, the list goes on. Despite being dense with bangers, the most notable thing about this project is that there are not one, but 2 songs that feature Carly saying away, 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 away in the chorus. By the way, this album is just the B-sides to her 2019 album Dedicated, so you can imagine how good that was, so go listen to that as well as this. Listen to this too. The From the Heart album was pretty cool, and with only 8 minutes of runtime, why wouldn't you go listen to it? Also, shout out Jed Will for being on Twitter more than anyone I've ever seen in my entire life. Jesus Christ, man. The chemistry between Young Gravy and Baby No Money is undeniable, and every time they link up, they come up with some of the most enjoyable shit there is. There's absolutely zero filler on this album, and it's pretty impressive to pull that off. This Six Impala album definitely isn't for everybody, since even I find the dramatic switches from sickly sweet vocals to thrash metal screaming a bit jarring from time to time. But I think it's worth putting up with since the album as a whole is refreshingly unique and at the very least doesn't even flirt with doing the same thing twice like so many other projects from this year. Now this is how melancholy singer-songwriter albums should be done. Oh Wonder has found a great balance between more upbeat tracks and slower ballads that managed to keep me interested the entire runtime, and I continue to listen to and enjoy the majority of the tracks here halfway into 2021. I know this is just a beat tape, but Louis the Child does so much here. It's just banger after banger. If you ever need a good summer album, here it is. I think the blurb sums this up nicely. This Medicine project was very smooth and relaxing, really just fantastic, with the standouts for me being Go Crazy and Get By. Believe it or not, this Louis the Child album was a bit disappointing for me. Don't get me wrong, I did thoroughly enjoy it. A few of the songs, such as Little Things and Free, felt like they were trying too hard to achieve summer playlist status, but in general, the rest of the songs were great. I know I said here that there was nothing standout, but looking back, that's just because about every song here was good and on par with everything else. Looking back at the track list, I don't even remember a single song I didn't enjoy, so yeah, good job, Coin. This Denzel Curry and Kenny Beats collab was just straight up cool. That's it. It was cool. Diet was the best song. This Petit Biscuit album is only about 30 minutes long, but goddamn if I don't absolutely love every single thing this guy puts out. Just fantastic electronic music. I can't wait to see what he does next. The Slow Rush by Tame Impala. This album is great, and honestly it's really impressive considering Tame Impala is just one guy. I bet you didn't know that, but yeah, it's just one dude. His name is Kevin. He's actually really cool. He made The Less I Know The Better. Have you heard that song? Probably not. Actually, my bad for assuming, but you should definitely go listen to it. It's very much in the underground indie scene right now. You're welcome for putting you on. Great album, Kevin. Good job. Yet again, I forgot what I meant when I said the transition between those 2 songs was jarring, so I went back and re-listened, and while I don't think the transition between the songs itself was jarring, the switch in energy is definitely unexpected, but it's okay because both songs are great, especially if you like chill electronic music, and the whole album's great, especially if you like chill electronic music, and I guarantee this will be your shit if you do. This 21 Savage and Metro Boomin album was insane. I know the blurb says rap album of the year. I'm going to warn you now that there are 3 rap albums I have ranked higher on this list. Regardless, this album is fantastic. 21 Savage is absolutely ruthless. Too bad B.O.B. had the idea of putting Morgan Freeman on an album first. You've probably heard everything on this, but in case you haven't, Future Nostalgia is a super solid pop album that's incredibly catchy and just super fun. Nightmare Vacation was easily one of my most anticipated albums of the year. Anger Management was fucking fantastic, so I was eager to see where Rico was gonna go from there. Although Nightmare Vacation isn't as intense and angry as its predecessor, it's still packed with hits and I thoroughly enjoyed every track here, besides maybe one or two. The features were all really solid and I was really glad that for once that year, my anticipation wasn't misplaced. Sugar by Megan Thee Stallion wasn't a project I was expecting to bang so hard. Literally every song is either great or really great. Fuck, even the Gunna feature's alright. That's how you know an album's crazy. Playful Spirits by In Love with a Ghost is just a really fun album. Most of the songs are electronic instrumentals and riffs, with the vast majority of the 29 tracks being just under a minute long. But with titles like Space Kitty with a Magic Propulsor, for real, how could you turn your nose up at this? Let me just say that even though this album was really good, I don't know why it says 8.6. It's an 8. Okay, now that that's out of the way, this was actual rap album of the year. I was such a big fan of Under Pressure and The Incredible True Story, but after Bobby Tarantino 2, I just kind of stopped listening to Logic's new stuff. Hearing this album was really exciting because Logic actually managed to do what every rapper that's fallen off hopes to do in bouncing back. This album is fantastic, and it was really great to have this be the note he went out on, even though he's apparently out of retirement, so we'll see where he goes from here. Alright, here we go. 58 albums down, and we're left with the bestest and the westest. My top 10 albums for all of 2020. At number 10 is The Buzz of a Lifetime by Knapsack. This album is criminally underrated. Literally just go listen to the opener and try telling me you're not interested. At 9, we have A Matter of Perspective by Drolo. Although this album sits at about 90 minutes of runtime, it goes by really quickly as every song flows together nicely without ever sounding too similar to what came before. If you want to get a feel for the album without committing to the full hour and a half, I suggest Roadside Flowers, Sunburn, and Homebound. I had never heard a Car Seat Headrest album before this, but I was really pleasantly surprised. This isn't even a genre I usually listen to, but I don't know, man, something about it really just clicked for me. So for clarification, Headache Relief and Blanket Mood are playlists of mine, so that's what that means, but I think that assessment holds up. So if you want to get the reference, go follow my Spotify, I'll link it below, follow my playlist, they're pretty good. Anyways, this album is very nice and good and quiet and peaceful and pretty. This Weekend album was really great. All the teasers had me so hyped, and Upside Down has become one of my favorite songs of all time. The songs vary between very summery and upbeat bangers and very dense noise beats with deep spacey vocals. All in all, my only gripe with this album is that the closing track feels a bit out of place amidst the rest of the songs, but this album is fantastic nonetheless. Folklore was surprisingly good. Not that I have any doubt in Taylor's ability this far into her career, but usually when she goes for such a drastic stylistic change, it can be a bit of a gamble when it comes to quality. In this case, the gamble landed in her favor. Conceptually, this album is pristine and stays very consistent throughout. The Bon Iver feature is fantastic, and I'm really glad she took this chance. This Peach Pit album was so good. After just a couple listens, I could look at every song title and hear the song playing in my head because they're all so memorable and unique. Shout out Beans After Dark on Twitter for putting me on. Really a near perfect indie album. And in the top 3, at number 3, is Charli XCX's Quarantine album, How I'm Feeling Now. Another album with no skips. The vibes on this one are immaculate, as one may say. Not me though, that's weird and cringe. Some of my favorite production in a pop album ever. It's fantastic. And number 2 on our list is Colorblind by Pluko. I really love this album. It has so many bright and colorful sounds cascading in and out of every track. It's just so beautiful. This is the type of album that you can't be sad listening to. It's uplifting and hopeful and kind of just makes you want to be outside on a hike or some shit. This album is about perfect, and I could definitely see a case being made for this being a 10. And finally, to round out the list, not only my favorite album of 2020, but one of my favorite albums of all time is RYC by Muramasa. I really love everything about this album, from its attempt to capture that certain type of melancholy nostalgia that's only really attainable when looking back at how your life used to be, especially as a child or teenager. From the very first strings on Raw Youth Collage, both the album's title and opening track You're struck with this instant sort of sadness, and as the track progresses, these odd synths and pitch down vocals pop in and out, further adding to the feeling of longing that this track produces. The next track, No Hope Generation, narrates exactly what the title suggests, the feeling of being part of a generation that is stuck and doesn't really know where their place in the world is or what role they're meant to play. It has a catchy drum beat underlining the looping guitar chords, making it one of the more upbeat songs on the album, which is an interesting contrast to the lyrics of the song, describing a group of people feeling so lost within the universe. I won't go into detail on every track here because we'd be here all day. Just know that the features on this are great, especially the slow tie feature on Deal With It, which seems probably the greatest acoustic departure from the theme set by the rest of the album, as slow tie goes on about being stuck in life, forced into a continuous cycle of repetitive days due to the unfairness of the rest of the world, while all the people around you act differently towards you since they don't recognize the inherent flaws in our world the same way you do, or even at all. Probably. The last song I'll dive into here is Teenage Headache Dream. This is the last song on the album besides the instrumental closer, and it is my favorite by far. It kicks off with a drum beat and guitar note being played together, and then Muramasa comes in with very quiet and forlorn vocals, with Ellie Rousel joining him shortly after. To me, this song really encapsulates everything this album represents, with its main focus being on looking back on your teenage years and romanticizing every little moment, every all-nighter, every crush, every midnight conversation, and living vicariously through your own memories since you feel like the real world isn't as good and probably never will be. This song is both tragic and beautiful, and at almost 5 minutes long, I always feel like it ends too quickly. I really can't quite put into words how much I love this album, but I hope I got close, so yeah, I feel like it goes without saying that this album is a 10, and thus will be added to the 10's topster. If you listened to this the whole way through, thanks. I know it was super long. What did you think? What albums did you listen to in 2020 or even fucking 2021? We're like halfway through and this video's so late. If you disagreed with any of these takes, please let me know what you think in the comments. Leave a like if you're awesome and swag, and please subscribe. Thanks.